Hello and welcome to Computer Science 440. This is game number 4 by Alex Brown. In the previous videos, I'll again be going over my code first to explain how everything works, and I'll also be going over my map layouts before demoing the game. The demo will be towards the end of this video. So here's the H file. It's pretty similar to the sprite sheet that was used in the previous labs. The biggest addition are these functions. They are used for statistical data once the player wins the game. It'll show the time completion of each maze, also the total time completion, and also the number of steps that player made. The number of steps is rather large and seems inaccurate, but since the player moves 5 pixels every step, it's really times 5. So uh, I'll explain that further when I'm demoing the video. Uh, hopefully, these are all my variables, largely the same. The only difference are these variables, which these are again for the statistical data at the end of the video, or sorry, at the end of the game. And this is to keep the frame that the player is in when they no longer press the up, down, left, or right keys. So that's all there is to the H file. In the CPP file, you have your typical constructor and deconstructor, uh, initializing sprites. I moved the old X and Y into the class variable. I don't remember the exact reason. Oh, it was actually I changed this. So I did originally have them in here, I think. I guess I don't need it here anymore. Anyway, here are my variables. I have 12 frames of my sprite, but due to the code where it counts plus plus, so this would go to 12 and it'd give me a glitch. So I made it 11 and it works perfectly fine that way. It was a little bit odd to me. Uh, the the sprite is 32 by 32. There's 3 columns in the picture, and direction is set to up initially. And these are, again, my data for the in game, just setting it all to 0, setting this to false, and loading my bitmap sprite, which is a goblin. So I did kind of a goblin theme. I'll explain in the demo more. It was pretty fun to put together, although it also was one of the hardest parts of this game. Although I felt more like having fun than challenging, but it did take a while to understand loading the sprite properly. In the update sprite, again, it's mostly similar to the lab update sprites. There are some slight differences, like setting the frame to false here, so that means it will no longer uh, count the number of steps if the player is stopped. That's what the stopped variable is for. I was mistaken a little bit ago. Yeah. So that's all the stopped variable does. And I also, since I want the player similar to the car lab where we had to rotate the car and it had to stop in the same direction when you press spacebar, I did kind of the same thing here with the current frames. So if the player is moving in a certain direction and they stop and do nothing, it'll stay in that direction. It won't default to a certain direction based on where it's drawn at. And in order to face up, down, left, and right correctly, I just edited the frames. So when they're up, this is the frame they start on. When they're down, that's the frame they start on, and so on. Nothing spectacular. And due to the scale and size of the mazes, they're rather medium-sized mazes. I had to increase the movement speed, or else it wasn't possible to complete the second maze in under 60 seconds. And even with this, the best time I've gotten is 11 seconds remaining. So you got to move quick. Although it's a rather easy maze, you just can't make too many mistakes running into walls, or else you'll run out of time. The direction number 4 means they're not moving. 3, 2, 1, and 0 are the other directions for the up, down, left, and right. So if they're moving number 4, that means they're stopped. So it won't increment the steps. And if it gets to this and the player is moving, it'll increment the steps. That's all this statement does. Here's my tile collision. I tried to perfect it as much as possible, and I believe I achieved that. From the Lab 11, there was some collision issues I didn't like that I could actually go back and fix since it's not due for another 7 hours or so, but I'm pretty much finished with it. But anyway, for this game, I wanted to perfect it, so that's why there's 2 collide statements on all directions. Because I found if I only had one, the best I could manage with the tile collision was on one side of the block, where the other side I could clip through it somewhat. And especially with the up and down, I could sometimes go through the entire column. So this prevents any of that from happening and achieves perfect collision, in my opinion, as I'll demo in the game. So that's all what this code is for. This just checks the win condition of the game. I'm actually not sure I use this anymore, honestly. Oh well. This just simply draws the sprite. I took out the if statement from the direction because I'm just drawing in the same position that he's facing, so it draws it correctly. I don't need to do anything special. And this function simply prepares the game for the next maze. So the start X and start Y values are the starting positions of the second and third mazes that are passed in manually, and then I set the frame to what direction I want the player to face when they start. So that's all this function does. Onto my main file. These are the same. There is... Oh, okay, I do use this. I use this to determine when they hit the end of the maze. I briefly forgot about that, but yeah, that's what this function does. And then in main, typical variables, I did add these 4 as well as this. This keeps track of the map, so it know when the player beats a maze, they know the game knows which one to load next. And this keeps track of how many you've beaten. These variables are simply for winning and losing, nothing special. If the player beats the game, this will become true. If the player loses the game, this will become true. And you have different end screens based on what result you've accomplished or not accomplished if you lost. Here I just load my first maze. All typical. Here are all my fonts. I did use some of the same fonts, just different sizes, as finding different fonts are few and far between. They're pretty difficult to find good fonts due to a lot of them not having numbers or special characters like, exclamation marks or question marks, etc. And others are hard to see on the screen. They look cool, but they're hard to look at. So I simply use 4 different ones and just different sizes for some of them based on the text. Here I load all my backgrounds. This is just the beginning screen. This is the end screen when you win. This is the end screen when you lose. Here's my beginning text, as you'll see in the screen. Just a little bit of story and a text saying press any key to start. And I flip the display so it appears on the text with the cell background. And I just wait for the player to press any key. But if they press escape or close the window, it closes immediately. It does nothing else. And I start the timer here, draw the background, draw the sprite, start my timer, and set my variables for the beginning of the maze. This is the timer. Since you have 60 seconds to complete each maze, it starts at 60, obviously. This is the difference to calculate the current time and start time. If it equals 1, it subtracts. So it starts out at 0 and only goes to 1. This keeps track of the total time it took to complete all 3 mazes. And this is simply used to subtract the difference from your maze time. Say you have 3 seconds remaining when you complete maze 1. So I pass in this variable minus that time, and that gives you 57 seconds. So you took 57 seconds to beat the first maze. That's just what this variable is for. It's to subtract from whatever time remaining to get the time it took for you to complete it. Here's my while loop. As long as the player does not escape or close out of the window, or they haven't won or they haven't lost, this will continue endlessly. I just do my timer here, as I was explaining with the difference. It's identical to the, I believe it was lab 6, where we had the 30-second countdown timer. So this is basically the same thing, except it's 60 instead of 30. And I also increment the total time here. So this keeps track of the total time it took to complete all 3 mazes. If you run out of time, lose becomes true. That's all what this does. And this is where I wait for the player to move up, down, left, and right, and I update the sprite accordingly based on the direction. And I also pass in the map variable, as you saw. I use it for map number 2 because I use a border of animated sprites instead of regular tiles, and I couldn't find collision detection on animated tiles, so I just hard coded the boundaries inside maze 2. So that's all that variable is for. On map 1 and 3 I use basic tiles, so I don't need boundaries, unlike maze 2. This is where I check if they've completed the maze. So once they hit the end of the maze, it'll trigger this function, or trigger this if statement to load the next maze. It increments both counters, and it loads the next maze based on this variable. So this is initially 1. When they hit the end of maze 1, this will increment to 2, which will activate this. And when they hit it again, it'll increment to 3, and it'll activate this. And all it does is I pause the timer. Otherwise, the player, while I'm resting the map, the player will not update. If I remove this, the timer would still decrease while the wait is active. So you'd have 5 seconds less to get to the end of the maze. And I actually meant to implement a message when you complete a maze saying, "Congratulations, wait 5 seconds," but ultimately I just left it the way it is. That way you would have a message notifying you that, hey, you beat the maze. The next one will start in 5 seconds to give you a slight pause, but I decided against it with all the text I did at the bottom, as you'll see. I got a little bit carried away with everything with the end game stat data. Anyway, this is where I set the player to the maze 2 starting position, which are just numbers I carefully chose through testing. So as I said, it just calls this function and it passes those 2 variables in, and I set everything accordingly. I'm honestly not sure I need this anymore. I just need the X and Y, but I didn't test it to take it out or anything. And then I load the second maze, I reset the timer to 60 seconds again, and I restart the frames per second timer as well. And I do the identical thing in maze 3. I considered putting these 2 in a function, but that required passing in a ton of variables, so I figured it was just best to leave it like this. And then if the map variable becomes 4, that means they beat the game entirely, and they've now beaten the game. Excuse me. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is where I was talking about the minute. I subtract 60 from their remaining maze time to get the time they completed each maze. So I pass this to store the variable later at the end. And that's all that does. And this is the same as usual. If they're not moving, it disables the key. If they close the window, the game ends instantly. Or apologies, this is when they press a key. This sets it to true, so they move up, down, left, and right, and the opposite for here. And this is where all the magic happens. This is largely the same from the test code, uh, as is this. I found as I was doing the timer, I was trying to think of a good way to display the timer, and I had a brilliant idea of displaying it above the player's head. So that's what this does. So the text is always displayed above the user's head. It did take me a while to catch on to the exact player position because initially I did the get X and get Y, and it would be far off to the side, and I had to dissect some of this code to realize I had to uh, position it with subtracting the X off and XY to get it directly above the player's head at all times. And then the +8 and -12 is simply for alignment. So it's as centered above the player's head as possible. Then I simply draw the sprite and, flip and clear everything. Now onto the victory and lose screens. Uh, if the player wins, it draws this text to the screen and it draws the winning background, and it just says you escaped the humans, congratulations. If you lost, it loads the loser background and it displays these messages. The humans caught you again, try again next time. And then this is all the statistical data that is used. I have this variable here, so it skips over everything if the player exits or closes the window, so it skips all of this entirely. Like I said, it just straight up closes the game, which is how I want it, because if you want to close the game, it should just close instantly for you. So that's why the if statement is there. And so this means if you have won or lost and the player hasn't exited the game at all with a force exit, it'll display all the text to the screen, which is just basic text. And then down here is where I do all the actual data. If the map counter is 0, that means you completed no mazes, and it displays incomplete next to all of these messages. Then it also, I actually no longer want this in here because I didn't do it for the other two. So it just displays incomplete and it just shows nothing further. If the map counter is greater than 0, it'll display all of this here. It'll display complete next to the name instead of incomplete, and it'll also be a different color, green instead of red. It'll display how many steps the player took throughout the maze, and also the time they took to complete the maze. And then if it is only 1, then it displays this message, which is just incomplete on the other 2 mazes. Since you only beat maze 1, you ran out of time on maze 2, so the other 2 are incomplete. I do the same thing with the other 2. I just display the same stats. And if the map counter is 2, that means you didn't complete maze 3, so maze 3 is incomplete. And for the same thing, if you beat all of them, it'll display this text as well, and it calculates the total time it took. And then based on that time, oh, this was a test variable. I no longer need that. My apologies. And then based on the total time it took, you get a rank. My personal best is 1.73 on all 3 mazes. So if you get a score below that, I call you a cheater. And then I just have different time slots and I have different ranks. I looked up the fastest animals and the slowest animals, and I just picked a random one basically on identifiable animals. Some of them I wanted to use, but I wasn't sure if not many people have heard of them or whatever. So I just use cheetah, hare, which is a rabbit, of course, hyena, turtle, and sloth. So based on time, since 3 minutes is the maximum time, since 60 seconds each, 3 mazes, that's 3 minutes. So I have a ranking system based on that. Then down here, this is basically more text to the end screen. All of this is the end game. I flipped the display so all this text shows, and then I set a new timer because instead of having the game rest for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, I wanted the player to have control over it, especially since there's several data on the screen at once. So I want the user to review that data and choose when to close out the game. So that's what this is for. I set it to 15 seconds, and this will also not activate if they close out the game at all. So it's only happens when they win or lose. And I do a while statement as long as it's not 0, it'll continue to do all of this code. And basically, it puts a timer in the bottom right-hand corner with 15 seconds, and it allows the player to increase or decrease that timer based on what they want to do. So it starts at 15. You can increase it all the way up to 99. It increases by 10 per case. So if you hit E, it'll add it plus 10, but if it's above 99, it'll set it to 99. And the same thing with D, it subtracts 10 from the maze time, and if it's less than 0, it sets it to 0. And if you press escape, I set maze time to 0. So that allows control from the player to simply choose when they're done with the game, look over any stats and get their time and whatnot, and have the ability to exit the game whenever possible through escape, closing the window, or de-incrementing the timer. And then I destroy all this stuff here. And then these two values are the same as the lab, nothing special. That concludes all the code here. I'll move on to my layouts. This is my first maze. I'll be going over the mazes very quickly so I can demo the code. It's I chose different themes for each one. This is lava based, obviously. These tiles are all animated sprites, or sorry, animated blocks. It's just a single one, and it switches from this to this endlessly. Now, my creativity skills are kind of lacking, so I did look online for maze layouts, and I tried to mimic 3 designs I liked as best as possible, but basically the filled in animated tiles are where I kind of messed up somehow with the scaling, because I kept everything 2 blocks wide on the pathing, but it's turns out it's quite hard to mimic a design perfectly. So that's all. So I decided to fill in the empty space with the animated blocks instead. So this is the first maze, and this is the end. This is the beginning and the end. Load the second one. This is water-based, obviously. This is the map I mentioned where my whole border is animated tiles, which is this one. And then I have a second animated tile, which is the end goal. And you start in the middle and you got to work your way to the bottom. As I mentioned, this is actually the easiest map, but it's also the longest. Since you start in the middle, you got to you have to go through all 4 corners basically. And if you run into walls too much, you're going to run out of time, because as I previously mentioned, my best time with this is 11 seconds remaining. On to the last one. This is kind of an ice level, I guess. I used a glass block from the grass set, just this one. And it's a glass maze. You start up here and you end down here. I actually consider this the easiest maze, as you can beat it in about half the time needed, which it was kind of a disappointment, but I put a lot of work into creating the mazes, and this was another part where this one I actually screwed up the most trying to mimic, so I kind of improvised the empty holes I had. But overall, I like all three mazes. And these are the animated blocks, as well as these four and those four. So, pretty fun. On to the demo of the game. Here's the opening screen with the story. You managed to escape those pesky humans because they jailed you or whatever. For whatever reason, you're a monster. They caught you, but you escaped, but you found yourself in a labyrinth, and you have to find your way out before the humans find you again. Press any key to start, and we will start. As you can see, here's my goblin with the timer above his head at all times. I thought was a great idea because I honestly didn't like any other way to display the timer on the screen because it would be blocked by the maze. So I really like that I thought of this. As you can see, of course, through testing, I know the exact path on all the mazes perfectly since I've tested this many, many times. I believe my best time was 26 seconds on this maze, so I'm not going to get it because I bumped into too many walls. And that's the endpoint, so it's going to load the next maze after a couple seconds. And I start in this position and the timer reset. And I got to hurry on this one if I bumped into a wall. So as you see, the background is the background tiles are completely animated, and I can't bump into them. I'll demo the collision when I go on the losing screen because this maze takes the longest, and I want to show the winning screen first, as that's harder one to show since I actually have to beat the game myself. So I'll probably get to the end with about 5 seconds left since I messed around a little bit. But you really don't have too much wiggle room to make a bunch of errors when you're walking. 6 seconds left. On to the third maze, and after about 1 more second. And then I start up here, and I'll go over into more detail on the second pass or third pass. Just taking my time through the maze. And I'm nearly there. Here I am, 35. And I won. And see in the bottom right, it shows the closes in number of seconds, and I can press E to increase it. I can press D to decrease it. And if I go all the way to 0, it'll close the game, so I don't want to do that just yet. As you can see, this is the background I chose. I didn't choose the entire dimensions of the game window as it impeded the data. So instead, I just put it in the corner here. As you'll see with the loser screen as well, it'll appear up here. You escaped the humans, congratulations. And I actually think I should have a T here instead of a D. Oh well. Anyway, here's the maze data for maze number 1, the number of steps taken, and the time I took to complete that maze, as well as the other two. And as you can see, it shows complete on the side. And down here, it shows the time completion. So it basically adds these three together and divides by 60 to get how many minutes it took for you to complete all three mazes. So I got the rank of Cheetah, so that's still pretty fast. And I believe that covers everything on the win window. I wanted more data to display, but there weren't many ways I could display more stats since you're really just walking to the end. So I wanted more, but I couldn't really think of more. So I'll decrease the timer. Whoop, wrong way. I'll let it close out on its own. And then I'll play the game a couple more times before finishing this video. And then it'll close now. There we go. Now I'll play it again and demo the collision. As you can see on the first maze, I started in the facing forward position, which is the way I wanted the player to face because they can't go left, right, or down. And as you can see, I'm trying to move to the left and it's not doing anything. Trying to move down, it's not doing anything. Trying to move right, it's not doing anything. Now the problems I had with the clipping is when moving left and right, about where my goblin is right now, I would pass through the column entirely, or when I'm moving up and down, I could go through these columns up and down, where now it's not the case. I tried to get as perfect as possible, which I think I achieved pretty well, but as you can see, in every instance, I cannot pass through these walls at all, and I can't clip through them at all. I'm about to run out of time, so we'll display some of the text I wanted to show on the loser screen. As you see, the game over screen is right here. It shows all 3 mazes as incomplete, so there's really no data to display. I could display the number of steps, but I chose only wanted to do that if they complete the actual maze. And I forgot to increment the timer, but as you saw, it showed the text from the loser screen that the humans caught you and try again next time. Oh, apparently it's pretty finicky. When I closed out of it, started it apparently. So this is the first maze, and I'll go to the other maze and also demonstrate. Well, I won't go to the third maze because it's the same exact code as the first maze, but I'll go to the second maze simply because I used animated tiles, so I had to code in the boundaries manually since animated tiles do not have collision detection at all, or at least what I found. You could only animate them. You couldn't add collision to them at all. So that's all I'll demonstrate on the second one. I'll also demonstrate different screens based on winning mazes 1 and 2. Display that correctly. So here's the animated down here. See, I can't go through it at all. If I took out the code in the collision part, I could walk through the boundaries entirely and make segmentation faults happen. And as you see here, I can't go up, or sorry, to the left, I can't go up. I'm actually probably going to run out of time demoing this because I'm farting around and you don't have too much time to complete this maze. So I'll probably have to make another pass to demo the losing screens for mazes 1 and 2 when you complete them. I might be able to get it with 1 second left. No, I'm not going to make it. No, not going to make it. As you can see, it shows you didn't complete the other 2, but you completed the first ones, so it shows the time. I only have the total time completion if you beat all 3 mazes, and as I mentioned, here's the text that the humans caught you. And I got it just in time before with 1 second left. And if I press D with 9 seconds remaining, it'll go to 0 and it'll close automatically. All right. I'll show you the other losing screens. So I have to play to maze 3 and let the timer run out, and then get the. Well, I already showed maze 1, so all I need to do now is get to maze 3 and show that losing screen. And that would conclude this video after that. Overall, I highly enjoyed making this game. I've enjoyed it the most out of all 4 of them. Not particularly difficult or well, it was time consuming making the 3 mazes, but it wasn't challenging at all to me. Unlike, well, game number 3 was a little bit challenging with took a second to get some of the sprite stuff loaded. That was the most difficult part of that one. But I had created a maze for a different computer science class, and I had a lot of fun with that and did several extra features like adding a key in order to get to the end of the maze. So until you found the key, you couldn't complete the maze. But I chose not to do that with this due to the time limit. But I could have managed somehow. See, there's 11 seconds. All right, now I just need to let the time run out on this. As you can see, collision detection works here because it's the same as maze 1. They're just still blocks. So the collision code works perfectly with this. I'm gonna explore other parts of the map, but it's just a bunch of dead ends. So you can come all the way down here. You're like, oh, dead end. Gotta go back and here. Oh, I didn't really showcase the anime tiles. It's just 2 shades of white and 1 shade of gray, roughly. So 3 frames. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with mazes, so I enjoyed this one even more since it's actual graphics, where the other one was text-based. It was also rather fun. I also put in a bunch of messages depending on the player's position, because there was a grid style. So if every move they made, it would generate a random message. Not always, though. I tried to randomize it enough. And here we go. You completed the first 2 mazes, but you didn't complete the third one, so you don't have a time completion. And it's just the same, showing the time taken. I guess I can go do one more pass. I'll show a different rank, perhaps. So since each maze is 60 seconds, it'll add time to complete all of them. Since I have to wait for the time to nearly run out on all 3 mazes before I get a different rank, so I'll do the worst rank. So basically, I think I calculated it where you need 5 seconds remaining on all 3 mazes in order to get the last rank. So I'll just wait. I'll wait until 4 seconds just to be safe. As you can see, the animated tiles, they just go from lava to pure lava like they're erupting. I kind of liked it. I did download the tile sets for maps 1 and 2 with I found tile sets online. These are mainly from Final Fantasy 7 and 8, which are pretty much the only ones I could find. And due to my lack of creativity, like I said, I only used a couple tiles from each set because they're like set pieces, and those 2 games are RPGs, so it doesn't really fit with a maze to put something together with them. So I just used different tiles instead. Because I didn't want to just simply use the grass tile set for all 3 of them. I felt that was too bland and easy. So at least with this maze, time is always low when I get to the end. Almost to the end. I'll wait a couple seconds so I get the last rank. And as you play through it, you'll get the different ranks accordingly. I tested it, they all work, but I'm not necessarily going to showcase all the different ranks simply because it'll take a long time to display them all, since I have to repeatedly beat all 3 mazes within a certain time frame, which includes waiting and doing nothing so the timer runs out. I could simply, well, I went the wrong way. I could simply rig it. Oh, no, I was going the right way. Whoops. I found this maze, I get lost more easily, even though it's the easiest, and even with testing. Anyway, gotta wait for the timer to run out since this is the easiest maze. Forgot what I was talking about a minute ago, so oh well. Oh yeah, I could rig it to display each message automatically, but it works. You just gotta trust me on that. There we go. I got the rank of Sloth, 2.85 minutes. I'll extend the time before I forget to 99. As you can see, it doesn't go past 99. And I also have a rectangle that clears the text, the number, like I did in previous games and labs. So it keeps all the text to the screen, and it clears this number constantly to make the new number appear. As you can see, nothing special. All the normal stuff, all the time you took, the number of steps, time completion, rank of Sloth. So that's the slowest time you can get. I'll go ahead and end the game. As I mentioned, I didn't really show the times specifically, but you see the different times here, the time windows. So basically 0.25 seconds, you get a new rank. So 2 minutes, 2.25, 2.5 minutes, 2.75, and above that is sloth. All right, I believe this concludes game number 4 of Computer Science 440. This game was created by Alex Brown, and I hope to see you next time.